I thought my home was the safest place, that my husband would always be my haven. But life isn't a dream, and dreams often end in nightmares. After a week-long business trip to Chicago, I returned home, a small suitcase in hand, hair disheveled from the long journey, heart eager with the thought of my husband, Michael, rushing to hug me like he always did. But our 18th floor apartment was eerily silent. No sound of footsteps hurrying to the door, no aroma of the meals he used to cook whenever I returned from a trip. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The living room was dark, with only a faint glow spilling from the bedroom. Then I heard it, a woman's giggle, not mine, not a friend's who'd ever visited. My footsteps soft as a cat's, I stood by the bedroom door, my heart pounding. In the dim amber light of the bedside lamp, I saw him, my husband, Michael, sitting on the bed, his arm around the waist of a young woman wearing his white dress shirt. He was in the same pants I'd folded for him the morning I left. I didn't scream or burst in like they do in movies. I quietly turned, closed the door, and locked it as if I'd never been there. Our home, our supposed sanctuary of love, had become a den of betrayal. I checked into a nearby hotel, unable to sleep, my mind replaying the image of them together. I didn't cry, I was done being foolish enough to cry for a man like that. The next morning, I returned home as if nothing had happened. Michael opened the door, surprised but quick to mask it. "You're back? Why didn't you tell me so I could pick you up?" I smiled, the same smile he once loved. "I wanted to surprise you." And I had only the surprise was mine. For the next few days, I pretended not to know. I asked about his day, cooked, and acted even more affectionate. A week later, I told him I'd fallen at a construction site, hit my head on steel, and was struggling with memory loss, only recalling things from before I was 10. He froze, but I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, hope that I'd forgotten his betrayal. I hadn't. And from that moment, the game of cat and mouse began. I still remember that overcast morning, light rain falling, mirroring the storm brewing in my heart. After my convincing act of amnesia, I cleaned the bedroom like a model housewife, the perfect wife in society's eyes. I pulled the bedsheets off, rummaged through drawers for an old bottle of air freshener, and found it, a long, chestnut-colored strand of hair tangled on his pillow. My hair is naturally black, Michael always said he loved it that way. So whose hair was this, left on my bed, in my home, beside my husband? I said nothing, just smiled, carefully tucked the hair into a tissue, and slipped it into the left drawer where I kept our wedding mementos. That afternoon, I pretended to tidy his study while he was on a call. I slid my hand into the gap of the sofa, a spot often overlooked, and found a movie ticket, 2 seats, side by side, dated 3 days ago. The movie was a sappy romantic drama, the kind he called sentimental nonsense for weepy women. So who was the weepy woman he'd gone with? While washing dishes in the kitchen, I noticed his white ceramic mug, one I'd bought at a pottery fair in Santa Fe, with a faint pink lipstick stain on the rim. I don't use that shade, and I don't wear lipstick at home. I'd washed that mug the previous afternoon, meaning someone had been here since, drinking from it, laughing, living in my space while I, the rightful owner, felt like a blindfolded guest. On Sunday, my mother-in-law, Margaret, stopped by, impeccably dressed, carrying a bag of fresh vegetables from her upstate garden. Her smile was warm, but her eyes sharp as knives. I brewed tea and invited her to sit. She glanced around and said casually, "That girl who came by the other day is quite the cook. Made a chicken stew with ginseng that Michael loved. Seems they get along well." I paused, then smiled, pouring her tea. I thought I was the only one who suited his taste. She didn't respond, just sipped her tea, her eyes appraising my performance, seemingly pleased with my act. That night, in the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. My eyes were the same, not red, not teary like in movies, just empty and tired. I laughed, unsure if it was at my own naivety or my convincing act. The woman's name was Claire Dawson, my college friend, whom I'd introduced to Michael as his assistant. I knew her, but I never imagined she'd use my trust to climb into my husband's bed. It's always the ones you trust who hurt you the most. I began preparing, noting every detail, saving every trace. Revenge isn't rushed, it takes time. I'd let them think I was weak, foolish, forgetful. But I remembered everything, and I'd make sure they did too. I once thought accidents were random, fate swinging a knife you couldn't dodge. But some cuts are planned, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That afternoon, I returned from a routine hospital checkup in bright, almost mocking sunlight. I buckled my seatbelt, started the car, and felt oddly light, as if crossing a threshold. I didn't expect that threshold to lie between two trucks. The brakes failed. I pressed hard, heel snapping, but the pedal sank uselessly, like a cruel joke. I lost control, skidded into the guardrail, and the car spun before crashing into a riverside barrier. I didn't die, but I didn't wake up normal either. In the hospital, faces blurred around my bed like an old photo soaked in water. I blinked and frowned. Where am I? The room fell silent. Michael rushed to me, his voice soft but tinged with relief. You don't remember anything? I looked at him, eyes wide like a lost deer, counting silently, 1, 2, 3, showtime. My mother-in-law stepped forward, her voice stern with seasoned authority. You really don't remember? Not even me or your husband? I shook my head. Husband? I'm married? Michael's smile twisted, and Margaret hesitated, her eyes darting to him before nodding, as if an idea had sparked. 3 hours later, Claire Dawson, Michael's sister by choice, arrived. She swept into the hospital room like she owned it, in a silk dress, heels clicking, hair cascading perfectly. If I were an audience member, I'd think she was the ideal mistress. She leaned in, smiling brightly. Emily, don't you remember me? We've been best friends since college. I tilted my head, forcing a smile. Sorry, I really don't. Her eyes spoke louder than her words, gleaming with smug triumph, as if saying, good. You're out of his life now. I memorized that look. 3 days later, I returned home, to the house I'd poured my heart into building, now a stage where I no longer played the lead. Margaret declared Claire would stay to care for me. She's close to the family and a great cook, she said. I smiled faintly. What about my husband? She waved a hand dismissively. He's busy. Claire will handle things. I understood then, I was a broken toy they were ready to shelve or toss out. I began recording, not on paper, but in my mind. Who said what, who did what, who laughed in my face, who thought I was truly foolish, I etched it all into my heart. I was an amnesiac, I was playing dumb. In a world of cunning players, only those who know their role win. And I would win, just not yet. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was pretending I didn't know I was being betrayed, every hour, every minute, every glance a trap in our shared home. Since returning from the hospital, I felt like a misplaced keepsake, redundant, pitiful. Everyone thought I remembered nothing, but in that fog, I saw clearer than ever. One morning, while Michael slept, I glanced at his phone. I wasn't planning to snoop, but a notification stopped my heart. Kitten, did you sleep well last night? Another followed from Sticky Rice, a photo of breakfast with the caption, made this for you. It's still hot, don't forget to eat. I set the phone down gently, hands steady, not waking anyone. In the bathroom mirror, I stared at a woman with tangled hair, thin nightgown, and red-rimmed eyes, not amnesiac, just playing the fool to see every move on the board. I decided if they saw me as a pawn, I'd be the pawn that falls to expose their flaws. 3 days later, I hid a tiny camera in the living room where Michael and Claire often discussed work. I also installed software to back up his texts to an old laptop stashed under clothes in the closet. Their sweet messages saved automatically daily. I didn't cry, I just recorded every word, every image, every promise from a man to a woman who wasn't his wife. I'd changed. The only person who knew I was an amnesiac was Ethan Harper, my old friend. We met at a small tea shop by the river one misty afternoon. He was polished, calm, and smart enough not to ask what I wasn't ready to share. "Still okay?" he asked, pouring tea. I smiled thinly. "Okay enough not to be dead." He didn't laugh but looked at me like he understood. We'd studied law together, interned under a tough mentor, and when I married, Ethan quietly helped me set up a separate contract for a small apartment as a safety net. Back then, I thought I was paranoid. Now I knew precaution wasn't pessimism, it was necessity. I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it before him. "I need to temporarily transfer asset management to a third party. More will come via encrypted email." Ethan looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "What happened, Emily?" I smiled, light as a breeze. "The usual. My husband has a mistress. The mistress is my best friend. My mother-in-law treats me like a brainless maid. And I'm living like a snake playing possum." Ethan's short, bitter laugh echoed mine. "I'm not forgiving anyone, Ethan," I said, eyes on my tea. "I'm just waiting for enough evidence, enough pain, to make them feel it back." That night, lying beside the man who betrayed me, listening to his steady breathing, I stared at the ceiling, tracing the scar on my wrist from the car crash. It reminded me daily that I could have died, but I didn't, because I wasn't done making them pay. I was no longer the gentle wife. I was the amnesiac card in their game, and I'd flip the table at the right moment. Oddly, I didn't cry from pain but from how well I played my part. One morning, sunlight barely piercing the curtains, I jolted awake, gasping as if pulled from death. "Michael!" I called, voice trembling like I'd just woken from a coma. He turned, eyes wide with panic. "I remember something," I said, voice frail. His first words betrayed him. "How? You're remembering?" I gave a weak smile. "Maybe the accident. My memories are patchy, like puzzle pieces." "Don't worry, I still know you're my husband." Relief washed over him, just as I'd predicted. Guilty people fear the truth. From that day, I became a fragile Emily, soft-spoken, forgetful, clinging to her husband like a lost kitten. No one suspected I was setting traps. I accidentally called Claire by the wrong name, sent Michael old texts of mine as if they were new, asking, "Did I write this?" Every move was a velvet-wrapped blade. Then I staged the first act, a surprise birthday party. I texted Michael and Margaret, saying I wanted a small celebration to thank them for not abandoning me in my amnesia. Their faces showed pity and guilt. To Claire, I said, "I still remember you, thank God. You're the only friend who didn't leave me. Come, it won't be fun without you." She cried, tears of a saint. I just smiled, faint as a winter breeze. The party was at our house, the house where I was once the mistress, now a tenant relegated to shadows. I wore a white dress, hair softly curled, lips red as blood, looking untouched by betrayal. That was what scared them most. As guests raised glasses, I fumbled, forgetting my lines, spilling wine, searching for the cake. Meanwhile, the hidden camera in the flower vase on the TV stand rolled. Michael got a call from his boss and stepped out, leaving Claire in the living room. As if it were routine, she sat in my chair, drank from my glass, and texted, "Where's my husband? Miss you so much." I stood behind the curtain, hearing his phone buzz on the table. Minutes later, she called him. It's her birthday, but I miss you so much, honey. Come back soon. I remotely stopped the camera. Enough. That night, after everyone left, I cleared the glasses like a dutiful wife. Michael watched the news, expressionless. I said nothing, just opened my laptop, played the video and audio from the hidden mic in the vase, edited to perfection. I created an anonymous email, attaching the clip and audio. Dr. Michael Stone, unethical conduct, illicit relationship with a non-spouse at his residence. Attached video evidence. Submitted to the Medical Ethics Board for review. I hit send without hesitation. It wasn't the final blow, just a gentle nudge. That night, Michael touched my back as we lay together. I flinched, feigning trauma from the accident. Who are you? You feel so unfamiliar. His hand froze, then withdrew. He turned away, silent. I closed my eyes, smiling. In this dirty game, I was no longer a pawn, I was placing the pieces, and this was just the opening move. They say the ones who stab you in the back are often the closest. I think differently, they're the ones you invited to dinner in your own kitchen. It started on an ordinary morning. I was dusting our faded wedding photo, the only thing I hadn't thrown out because it served as a prop. I heard flip-flops and smelled cheap perfume, Claire's signature scent. Before I could turn, my feet slipped, a strong push sending me tumbling down the stairs. Everything went white. My head hit the third step, then rolled to the bottom. It felt like someone had tried to send me straight to hell. I woke in the hospital, head bandaged, arms scratched. The first face I saw was Margaret's, pretending to hold my hand, voice choked like a stage actress. You were so careless, dear. Thank God you're okay. I saw you at the top of the stairs before you fell, didn't I? I stared, pain throbbing in my temple, not from the injury, but from disgust. The police took statements, but Margaret and Claire insisted I'd been dizzy from my condition. Michael didn't show, claiming he was tied up with a surgery. I didn't need them there. Mrs. Carter, our old housekeeper who'd quit 2 months earlier when Margaret replaced her, was there. She pulled me aside, whispering, I saw it. She was behind you. I know who pushed you, but she forced me to lie. I squeezed her hand. You don't have to lie anymore. I have proof. 3 days later, I returned home and opened my laptop, pulling footage from a balcony camera I'd installed after the car accident. It didn't clearly show the pusher's face but captured their conversation after I was taken away. Claire flopped onto a chair, laughing. I thought she was dead. So tough, isn't she? Margaret poured tea, voice calm. No matter. You'll be the official daughter-in-law soon. If Emily goes fully mad, the inheritance will be easier to handle. Official daughter-in-law. Madness. I laughed, a laugh born from waking in a disguised hell. I didn't confront them or cry. I transferred the clip to a secret hard drive, my talisman. Then I called Ethan Harper, the only lawyer who knew what I'd done with my premarital assets. Ethan, I want to start gathering evidence for a divorce and press charges for attempted assault, maybe even conspiracy to seize assets. He paused, then said, I'm ready. I hung up, staring into the mirror, hair messy, face pale, head bandaged, but my eyes held only a cold fire. I wasn't their puppet anymore. I was the director, and this tragedy was just beginning. I hadn't thought I was good at chess, but I just never sat at the right board. 3 days after leaving the hospital, I met Ethan at a discreet cafe behind the Riverside complex. He wore a gray shirt, face impassive but eyes alight, as if he knew what I was planning. I handed him a thick folder, camera footage, Margaret's recordings, proof of Claire's frequent visits when I was away, evidence Michael had tried transferring company shares to a friend to hide assets. Ethan asked one question: "Do you want this handled quietly or to ruin their reputations?" I sipped cold tea. Both. 3 days later, an anonymous package arrived at Michael's hospital, a bank statement showing regular transfers to Claire, texts from Kitten asking when she'd signed divorce papers, and photos Michael sent her of our bedroom, like trophies. The hospital, bound by its ethics code, launched an emergency disciplinary review. Michael was suspended pending investigation. Claire was ousted from the research team I'd introduced her to 2 years earlier. You don't need to scream in the streets to expose betrayal, sometimes a few lines and the right recipient suffice. In Ethan's law office, I read the divorce petition. Emily Harper, lawful wife of Michael Stone, requests a unilateral divorce without reconciliation. Grounds: infidelity with evidence and deliberate asset concealment, causing severe emotional harm. Requests public court proceedings. I signed. I didn't need reconciliation or apologies. I needed justice. At the hearing, Michael wore a faded gray suit, his usual arrogance gone. His lawyer stood by, but he knew I held more cards. I walked in, head high. They saw me as a victim, but I wasn't anymore, I was the plaintiff. The court asked if I could confirm premarital assets. I presented notarized contracts for my house, car, and savings, all predating the marriage, legally binding, witnessed by a lawyer. Michael's side was silent. His hands trembled. He'd realized what he'd lost, not to another woman, but by underestimating the one he married. When the trial ended, I glanced at Claire, there as a witness. Her eyes avoided mine. I smiled, not bitter, not triumphant, just the smile of someone placing the final piece. The game had turned. Someone once asked how I stayed calm through such betrayal. I smiled faintly. It's not that I didn't hurt. I just wasn't foolish anymore. 2 weeks after the initial hearing, Michael's prestigious lab at St. Mary's Research Institute was partially shut down by a government audit for suspected money laundering through research grants. His name, Michael Stone, was on the front page of the industry's internal report. I didn't need to join the investigation. I'd smelled dirty money in his overseas funding boasts when he thought I knew nothing about finance. No one knew the dull, useless wife had quietly transferred all her assets to Ethan's management 3 months before the car accident. I didn't trust people, but I trusted contracts. I wasn't sure I'd win, but I ensured I wouldn't be passive. The home cameras synced to a cloud with a password only Ethan and I knew. While Michael faced suspension, frozen accounts, and corporate lawsuits for embezzlement, Claire, his kitten, was fired from the Advanced Materials Institute I'd gotten her into. The official reason: ethical violations damaging the organization's reputation. Margaret, my mother-in-law, faced a civil lawsuit from my family. She'd faked my mental health records to have me declared incompetent, aiming to cut me from inheritance. Too bad the camera I'd installed in her study after the stair incident caught her instructing her lawyer, "As long as she signs the incapacity papers, Claire will handle the inheritance." They thought they'd burn me, unaware I'd lit the fire first. I still remember standing before the mirror, wiping the bruise from my fall, thinking, "Emily, stop crying. Start remembering." When police questioned me about the forged documents and asset theft, Margaret paled, and the last I saw of Claire was in a local news clip, leaving an investigation room, face ashen, no longer the poised woman she'd been. Michael was detained, his medical license revoked. He'd entered his institute with pride, now he left with his head bowed in a temporary cell. I didn't win because I was better than them. I won because I stopped being soft. I didn't want to destroy anyone, but if they doused my house in gasoline and lit a match, I'd at least stand on the roof and laugh as they burned to ash. They say what a woman needs isn't an apology but someone who understands her pain. I thought I'd never want to see anyone again, not Michael, not Margaret, not even Ethan. Yet I accepted his dinner invitation, a simple meal, no strings, no roses, no candles, no cinematic proposals. Just two old friends, like boats lost in waves, now docked at the same pier. We met at a small diner on Lakeview Drive, our old college hangout. Ethan, in a white shirt and striped tie, carefully picked dishes I'd loved as a talkative, forgetful 20-year-old Emily. Now, I'd learned to eat slowly, chew carefully, and read others' eyes. "Still like it spicy?" he asked, passing me Sichuan tofu. I nodded. "Still do, but I don't cry from the heat anymore." We talked like adults, not dwelling on why he'd vanished back then or what might have been. We faced our old scars silently. When he paid, he handed me a small box. I looked at him, half suspicious, half amused. "Don't tell me this is a proposal ring." He shook his head, smiling gently. "It's the ring you picked back then. I kept it, not to wait for you, but to remind myself not to lose what matters." I didn't return it or wear it. I just said, if you want to start again, don't use an old ring. I'm not that Emily anymore. The next week, I returned to my old company, not as an employee, but as an investor. The shares I'd hidden in a trust were now in my name. At my first shareholder meeting, I didn't tremble. I overheard someone whisper, "She's so different now." I turned, smiling. Different because I don't want to live like before. Leaving the office, I saw a young woman my age from years ago, eyes swollen, clutching her phone, muttering, "Why did he do this to me?" I paused, not to preach, but because I saw myself in her, the me who trusted someone more than herself. I didn't comfort or advise. I just said softly, "If you believe you're worthy, live like no one ever hurt you." She looked up, her teary eyes flickering with quiet resolve. I finally understood, we women, betrayed and broken, don't need apologies. We need to stand tall and walk on, as if we never fell. My wedding wasn't a spectacle, no endless floral arches, no primped bridesmaids, no viral proposal. It was the first time I stood in a white dress, not to keep a man, but to claim my life. That morning in Boulder, Colorado, was cool enough for a thin silk shawl over my gown. The ceremony was at a resort on a hill overlooking a river, with lush trees and serene quiet. No one from my old life was invited, not Michael, not Margaret, certainly not Claire. I didn't need blessings from those who'd scarred me. Beside me were close friends, Mrs. Carter, the housekeeper who'd defended me, and Ethan. As I stepped from the bridal suite, he stood in a small garden adorned with white daisies and pale wisteria, not flashy, but gentle, like his gaze. "You're here," he said. I smiled, taking his hand without hesitation. My heart had survived a war, it no longer needed a fortress. We wed under a ginkgo tree, witnessed by friends, hotel staff, and a sunny sky. No one cried or read poetry, but when I said, "I do," I knew I was closing one chapter and starting another in bold. After the small reception, I changed out of my gown and stood on a cliff overlooking the valley. Ethan approached, silently draping a shawl over me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Never better." I asked, "Do you think forgiveness is necessary?" He paused, watching the sunset swallow the past. "I don't forgive them, but I've forgiven myself from carrying their hate another day." We didn't post wedding photos or flaunt our joy. But when a candid shot of me in my dress, serene amid greenery, spread through old friends' chats, comments followed, "She married her true love. She won." I didn't need to win. I just needed not to lose myself. Our honeymoon wasn't a storybook affair, no Maldives, no rose petal beds, no filtered photos for strangers. Ethan and I chose a quieter place, a small town in Oregon, bathed in sun, with spotty Wi-Fi that kept me from checking work emails every 10 minutes. I called it a honeymoon without honey, full of getting lost, sudden rain, and eating curry so spicy I cried in the restaurant. On day one, Ethan confidently navigated with a printed map, only to land us in an alley surrounded by cats, locals eyeing us like time travelers. He laughed. "At least you're not faking amnesia anymore." I glared. "If I were, you'd be talking to a cat, not your wife." On day 3, we rented a tandem bike. I insisted on balancing it, only for us to crash into a grassy ditch. I sprawled out, laughing, grass in my hair. Ethan, brushing his scraped knee, muttered, "Didn't know my wife was a bike assassin." At our inn, I made hot tea, and for the first time in years, I sat still, feeling peace. That night, Ethan gave me a small leather notebook. "What's this?" "A diary?" He shook his head. "A journal for things you don't have to pretend about anymore." I opened it. The first page read, in neat handwriting, "No need to pretend you're okay. You really are now." I closed it and hugged him tightly. The next morning, I opened the window, letting in the scent of wisteria. I felt alive, not just a shell of old wounds. Ethan slept, shifting slightly on a lumpy pillow. I grabbed my phone, not to check news, but to snap a rare peaceful moment, not for posting, but for me. No spotlight, no crown, no need to broadcast happiness. I knew I deserved it. For the first time after years as an unwilling actress in a betrayal drama, I was truly living. 10 years after that hillside wedding, I kept our dried wedding invitation in a wooden frame, with my handwritten note, "I don't forgive them, but I forgive myself." That was half true. The other half was forgiving myself from agonizing over a little girl who's 100% her father's mischievous DNA. "Mom!" Dad dropped stuff in the public bathroom again. My 6-year-old daughter, Lily, shouted in a mall play area, pointing at Ethan, who was red-faced, clutching a bag of groceries. I laughed through tears. Lily, a mix of my wit and Ethan's deadpan face, had a knack for embarrassing adults. Once, at a restaurant, she tapped my arm. "Mom, did you ever catch Dad with someone else?" I nearly choked on my soup. "Where'd you learn that?" "Grandma said you pulled off an epic revenge, better than a movie." I texted my mom, "Got too much time on your hands?" We're not a perfect family. Ethan's cooking is awful, and I keep forgetting Lily's jacket at school. But we've kept one thing for 10 years, honesty, never repeating old mistakes. One day, Lily found a metal box under the bed with all the files, photos, and evidence I'd used against Michael and Claire. Eyes wide, she asked, "Mom, were you a spy?" I shrugged. Close enough. That night, after Lily slept, Ethan and I stood on the balcony under a crescent moon. I asked, "Do you think we can teach her to live kindly without the slaps we took?" He paused, hand on my shoulder. "No one avoids scratches," he said. "But if you're there to bandage her in time, she won't carry scars." I looked at him, struck silent. Years had cooled our impulsiveness and anger, but they'd taught us peace isn't a given, it's guarded daily with trust, kindness, and enough humor to survive Lily spilling milk on important papers. I, who once faked amnesia to set traps, now use that memory to hold on to Lily's giggles and sparkling eyes in the sun. No one survives betrayal without pain, but no one moves forward carrying it like a name tag. I learned forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's retelling the story and still smiling. In the end, what weighs heaviest isn't the betrayal, but the trust we once gave so freely. Yet those falls taught Emily Harper to stand, not for blind revenge, but to reclaim her honor, self-respect, and right to happiness on her terms. This isn't just a tale of spectacular retribution, it's a journey to rediscover a woman's worth, once underestimated.